Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is a friend.
They said it was just another ESPN contract story, just another host quietly leaving the network. But now, new leaked footage of Molly Querim and Stephen A. Smith has exploded online. Footage that doesn't just raise questions, it demands answers. Why did Molly walk away without warning? And what was Stephen A. hiding on set? Tonight, we uncover the shocking clips that ESPN never wanted you to see, and why this viral moment could change everything for the face of First Take. The abrupt exit that shook ESPN. The internet is on fire right now because new leaked footage of Molly Querim and Stephen A. Smith has just gone viral, and the fallout is nothing short of explosive. This isn't just another celebrity rumor. This is a window into ESPN's most powerful partnership crumbling in real time. And what you're about to hear will change how you see both Molly and Stephen A. forever. Think about it. 1 minute, Molly was the face of First Take, holding that desk down for over a decade. The next minute, gone. No farewell, no send-off, no goodbyes to the fans who had tuned in every morning for 10 straight years. She didn't walk out gracefully. She stormed out, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a flood of speculation. And now, with this footage resurfacing, fans are connecting the dots in ways ESPN desperately hoped they wouldn't.
Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is a friend.
That was Stephen A. Smith, choking up on live television, trying to explain the unexplainable. He wanted the world to believe this was nothing more than a contract issue. But you and I know better, because the timing, the silence, and the suddenness all screamed that something else was going on behind the scenes. And let's be clear, this wasn't a clean exit. ESPN executives scrambled to spin it that way, but even their own president of content admitted the truth. The timing caught them completely off guard. The network had no send-off plan. They didn't even have a replacement ready. This wasn't a smooth transition. This was an emergency landing.
This was an abrupt landing. This is an emergency exit. This is an emergency landing.
The big question, why? Why would Molly risk her career, her reputation, and her paycheck to vanish overnight? Some point to money, and yes, the numbers matter. ESPN lowballed her, offering a deal so insulting that even after 20 years at the network, she refused to sign. Remember, Stephen A. Smith negotiated himself into a jaw-dropping $20 million deal. Molly, she wasn't even offered a fraction of that. And when Stephen A. went on air, bragging about how he had fought for other colleagues to get paid, fans couldn't help but notice the hypocrisy. Because if he really stood up for everyone, why didn't Molly get her cut? But the leaked footage suggests it wasn't just about money. Behind the scenes, Molly had been pushing for a bigger role, her own show, her own platform. After years of being the moderator, the woman keeping two overgrown egos in check, she wanted more, and ESPN wasn't willing to give it to her. So when the contract talks broke down, she didn't just walk away. She slammed the door shut. And Stephen A., he wasn't ready for it. He admitted on his radio show that he was blindsided, that Molly's decision came without warning, without even a whisper to the man she'd worked beside for 10 years.
To be blunt, it came as a shock. I was not aware that this is something that she was contemplating doing. But in the end, she made her decision. And we have to move on as a show.
But let's not pretend Stephen A. is some innocent bystander here. When you're making $20 million, while the person sitting next to you is told they're not even worth a quarter of that, tensions build, resentment festers, and eventually it explodes. That's where the viral footage comes in. Clips are circulating of Molly walking off set mid-show, not laughing, not joking, but straight up done.
Who are you going with?
Top 5. Does he make your top 5?
Okay, I'm leaving.
Damn it, I'm going with Matthew Stafford in that case.
At the time, people brushed it off as playful, but now, in light of her sudden departure, fans are rewatching it with new eyes. Was that moment just a gag, or was it the beginning of the end? Because here's the thing, Molly's silence is loud. She hasn't given interviews. She hasn't spilled her side. The only clue came from her Instagram story.
Now that the news came out earlier than I intended, and not in the way I hoped, to my First Take family, after much reflection, I've decided it's time to close this incredible chapter and step away from First Take. Hosting this show has been one of the greatest honors of my career.
Sounds polite, professional, but notice what's missing. No mention of Stephen A. No mention of ESPN executives. Just a vague farewell wrapped in gratitude. And that silence has fueled speculation that Molly wasn't just walking away from a job. She was walking away from Stephen A. Smith himself. Some insiders even claim she wanted distance from his larger-than-life presence, his constant self-promotion, his dominance over every broadcast. Whether or not that's true, the result is undeniable. The leaked footage has fans fans convinced that the tension between Molly and Stephen A. was much deeper than anyone realized. And the most shocking part, we haven't even gotten to the footage ESPN does not want you to see, because the clips you're about to watch suggest that Molly's departure wasn't just about contracts or career ambitions. It may have been a desperate move to escape a toxic environment, one fueled by power, money, and unchecked egos. When you peel back the layers of this controversy, one theme keeps coming up again and again: power. Who has it? Who doesn't? And what happens when the balance tips too far in one direction? For years, Stephen A. Smith has been the undisputed king of ESPN. He knows it. The executives know it. The audience knows it. He's not just a commentator. He's the brand. Entire programming schedules are built around him. Ratings depend on his voice, his antics, his ability to dominate a debate. So where does that leave Molly? The woman who sat at the same desk for a decade. The woman who managed chaos every morning. Who absorbed the verbal crossfire of Stephen A. versus whoever was brave enough to challenge him. She wasn't just a moderator. She was the anchor keeping the show from spiraling off the rails. And yet, when it came time to renegotiate, ESPN treated her like she was disposable. Executives admitted that Molly's exit was ugly. They knew the money wasn't right. They knew the offer was insulting. But instead of fixing it, they let her walk. Why? Because in their eyes, Stephen A. was irreplaceable. Molly wasn't. That cold calculation reveals everything you need to know about ESPN's culture. They'll pour millions into their star, while everyone else is told to be grateful for scraps. And Stephen A. didn't help his case. Just days before Molly's abrupt resignation, he went on air boasting about how he had fought for other talent at the network to get paid. He painted himself as a savior, a champion of fairness. But when the woman sitting next to him couldn't even secure a contract extension, that's not just irony, that's betrayal. Fans saw it too. Social media exploded with comments calling him out. Stephen A. will fight for everyone's bag but Molly's. Funny how he can brag about helping Shannon Sharp, but his own co-host gets lowballed. And maybe that's why his on-air goodbye rang so hollow.
Am I going to share it with you? No. Because again, that's her story to tell. But I do think it's important that I started off the show by just acknowledging my love and appreciation for her and what she's meant to me and what she's meant to the show.
On the surface, it sounds supportive, but read between the lines. He's distancing himself. He's making sure he doesn't take the blame. He's hiding behind the phrase, "That's her story to tell," knowing full well that her silence would protect him. Because let's be real, if Molly ever decided to break that silence, if she ever decided to tell her story, it could bring ESPN to its knees. And maybe that's why she hasn't spoken yet. Behind the scenes, industry insiders suggest that Molly's contract includes what's known as a quiet clause. Essentially, if she stays silent, she keeps getting paid through the end of the year. If she talks, that money disappears. Ben Koo of Awful Announcing put it bluntly, leaving with months left on a contract, no farewell episode, no chance to explain herself. It reeks of an agreement made under pressure. An agreement where one side wanted to protect their golden goose at all costs, but the cracks were already showing long before she walked out. There's a clip now resurfacing across Twitter and TikTok of Molly visibly frustrated on set, cutting off Stephen A. mid-ramble, her eyes screaming what her words didn't. Fans are calling it the moment she snapped, and maybe it was. Think about what it must have been like. 10 years of being talked over. 10 years of holding the peace while others got the spotlight. 10 years of being the steady hand, only to be told you're worth less than colleagues who hadn't even been there half as long. At some point, everyone has a breaking point. And for Molly, that point came when ESPN tried to lock her into another cycle of being undervalued. Now let's zoom out, because this isn't just a Molly Querim story. This is a pattern. Look at what happened to Max Kellerman, her former co-host. One day he's debating Stephen A. like normal. The next, shipped off to morning radio without so much as a goodbye. Why? Because Stephen A. didn't want him anymore. Look at Jamil Hill, pushed out after daring to speak her mind. Look at Michelle Beadle, frozen out after challenging the status quo. The message is clear. If you're not Stephen A., you're expendable. And that is why this leaked footage is such a big deal. Because for the first time, it shows the toll of that imbalance. It shows what happens when one voice becomes too powerful, when one personality consumes everything around them. And if ESPN thought Molly's silence would protect them, they were dead wrong. Because the audience isn't stupid. They're piecing it together. They're watching the clips, connecting the dots, and realizing that the story we were fed, just a contract dispute, doesn't add up.
The obvious take is that whatever happened is it wasn't amicable. This is not them parting on good terms.
So here we are. Leaked footage circulating, fans outraged, ESPN scrambling to protect its brand, and Stephen A. pretending nothing's wrong. But the most important piece is still missing, Molly's voice. And until she speaks, we're left to speculate, to read between the lines, to replay every clip clip with fresh eyes, looking for the moment where it all went wrong. And maybe that's why this scandal has so much traction, because it's not just about what happened, it's about what didn't happen. The words that weren't said, the goodbye that never came, the truth that's still being buried. Make no mistake, this is bigger than sports television. This is about the way power silences people. This is about how corporations will protect their stars at the expense of everyone else. And this is about what happens when the person they try to silence decides to walk away instead. And we're just getting started, because part 2 of this story, that's where the footage gets darker. That's where the whispers about Stephen A's role in Molly's exit stop being whispers and start being accusations. And when you hear what insiders are saying next, you won't look at ESPN the same way again. Was Molly running from Stephen A. Smith? By now, you've probably asked the same question millions of fans are asking. Was Molly Querim's departure really about money, or was she trying to escape Stephen A. Smith? Because when you go back and look at the leaked footage, the comments, the timing, everything points to something much deeper than just a failed contract negotiation, and the evidence is damning. Let's start with Stephen A.'s own words. When Molly's exit was announced, he tried to frame it as nothing more than business.
The details, quite frankly, are none of y'all business, but it's not as if I know all the details. It was a contract negotiation that was going on. ESPN certainly did not want to lose her.
Sounds harmless enough, right? But listen closer. The details are none of y'all business. That's not just deflection. That's defensiveness. That's someone trying to shut down speculation before it even begins. And in a media landscape where everything gets dissected, a line like that only makes fans more suspicious, especially when you add what came next. Stephen A. couldn't resist making it about himself. He went on one of his trademark rants about bosses, money, and power, essentially reminding everyone that he is the one with leverage.
But when you don't come in, it makes me think maybe Stephen A. is a part of her frustration.
Well, part of that clip of Stephen A. Smith yesterday that dealt with this subject, he went on this diatribe about how everyone has a boss, that everyone has someone that they have to be accountable for, and no one's ever completely free.
Read that again. Maybe Stephen A. is part of her frustration. That's not some random YouTuber speculating. That's a former ESPN insider connecting the dots. And it's not hard to see why. Stephen A. Smith is ESPN's golden boy. He's the face of the network. He gets the blockbuster contracts, the private jets, the primetime slots. When he sneezes, the suits hand him tissues made of silk. Meanwhile, Molly had to fight for scraps. And the moment she asked for more, a bigger role, a show of her own, a paycheck that reflected her decade of loyalty, suddenly she's out the door. Coincidence or consequence? Because here's the thing, this isn't the first time we've seen this play out. Think back to Max Kellerman. Stephen A. admitted on record that he wanted Max off first take. Months later, Max was gone. And now, Molly. Are we really supposed to believe that Stephen A., the most powerful voice at ESPN, had nothing to do with her abrupt exit? Let's look at the timing. Just a week before Molly's departure, Stephen A. went on air bragging about how he had fought for Shannon Sharpe's deal, how he had gone to bat for other talent at the network. But when Molly's contract negotiations collapsed, silence. No public defense, no support, just vague platitudes. And that's where the hypocrisy cuts the deepest. He'll fight for others, but not the woman who sat beside him for 10 years, the one he called a friend, a partner, someone he leaned on countless times. Fans noticed, and they weren't kind. Tweets flooded in. Stephen A. is loyal to everyone except Molly. He stood up for Shannon, but left Molly hanging. 10 years together, and this is how it ends? Pathetic. And maybe the most telling part is Molly's own reaction, or lack of it. Her Instagram farewell was graceful, almost too graceful.
Now that the news came out earlier than I intended, and not in the way I hoped, to my First Take family, after much reflection, I've decided it's time to close this incredible chapter and step away from First Take. Hosting this show has been one of the greatest honors of my career.
Notice what's missing? No mention of Stephen A., no acknowledgement of their partnership, not even a thank you to the man who supposedly called her a friend. For someone as polished as Molly, that omission wasn't accidental. It was a statement, a silent protest. And silence, in this case, is louder than any speech. But the leaks don't stop there. Whispers inside ESPN suggest Molly had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Stephen A.'s outsized presence. Not just the money gap, but the power gap. He controlled the show. He dictated the flow. Even when she tried to assert herself, it was clear whose voice carried the weight. One insider described it bluntly: Molly was the traffic cop. Stephen A. was the bulldozer. Eventually, the bulldozer wins. And if you think that's dramatic, just look at how fast the network moved once she was gone. They didn't fight for her. They didn't beg her to stay. They immediately started tryouts for new hosts, shuffling in replacements like she never existed. Executives openly admitted they were were already preparing for her to be phased out, that tells you everything. She wasn't seen as essential. She was seen as replaceable. And that's the heartbreaking part, because Molly wasn't just a moderator. She was the glue, the steady hand, the person who kept two massive egos from imploding the show on live television. Without her, First Take becomes chaos. But to ESPN, to Stephen A., that didn't matter. And so Molly left. Not at the end of the year, not with a farewell episode, not with a bow on top. She left immediately, which tells us one thing. Whatever happened, it was personal. Think about it. If it were just about money, she could have coasted to December, collected the checks, played nice. Instead, she ripped the cord out of the wall and walked away mid-shift. That's not business, that's survival. And that's why fans are convinced the leaked footage proves she wasn't leaving ESPN. She was leaving Stephen A. Smith. But here's where it gets even darker, because if you dig into the pattern of how ESPN handles its talent, especially women, the story gets uglier. Michelle Beadle, Jemele Hill, Carrie Champion, all strong women, all eventually pushed out or sidelined after clashing with the network's star system. Molly may be the latest name on that list, and the leaked clips of her walking off set, the frustrated looks, the abrupt silence, they're not just viral moments. They're evidence. Evidence of a toxic culture. Evidence of a power imbalance. Evidence that one man's empire came at the expense of everyone else around him. And now with the footage spreading online, that empire is starting to crack, because fans aren't just watching, they're demanding answers. They're calling for transparency. They want to know what really happened between Molly Querim and Stephen A. Smith. And in part 3, we'll uncover the theory that ESPN fears the most, the possibility that Molly has receipts, that she left not just because of money, not just because of frustration, but because she had the leverage to expose something much bigger. And if those receipts ever surface, Stephen A.'s empire won't just take a hit, it could collapse. The receipts that could end his empire. If part 1 showed you the shock and part 2 revealed the betrayal, then part 3 is where we confront the possibility that Molly Querim didn't just walk away. She walked away with receipts. And if those receipts ever see the light of day, they could topple one of the most powerful empires in sports media. Because let's not kid ourselves, nobody leaves ESPN like this. Nobody with 2 decades of loyalty, 10 years at the same desk, and millions of fans just vanishes overnight without so much as a goodbye show. Unless there's something much bigger brewing beneath the surface. So what exactly could Molly be holding back? Start with the money. We know ESPN tried to lowball her. Multiple sources confirmed the contract negotiations were ugly. We know she felt undervalued, and we know Stephen A.'s massive $20 million deal created resentment across the network. But it wasn't just about the paycheck. Molly reportedly pushed for her own platform, not just as a moderator, but as a host, a voice, a star in her own right. And when ESPN refused to budge, she saw the writing on the wall. And here's where the receipts theory comes in. According to insiders, Molly wasn't just frustrated, she was documenting conversations, contract terms, moments of disrespect caught on tape, quiet text exchanges that showed just how one-sided ESPN's loyalty had become. Think about it. You don't survive at a network like ESPN for 20 years without learning how to protect yourself. You don't last a decade beside Stephen A. Smith without realizing how easily the blame can be shifted onto you. So maybe, just maybe, Molly left on her terms, armed with enough proof to make sure ESPN couldn't spin the story entirely in their favor. And you can see the fear in how Stephen A. addressed it.
But in the end, she made a decision to walk away from the show effective immediately. As you see from her Instagram post, that story is for her to tell. Do I have an idea? Of course I do. Am I going to share it with you? No. Because again, that's her story to tell.
Notice the pattern? That's her story to tell, over and over again, almost like a warning, almost like he's saying, if she talks, we're finished. And that's why ESPN has gone into damage control mode. Within hours of her resignation, they were pushing executives in front of cameras to smooth things over. Burke Magnus, ESPN's president of content, issued a glowing statement praising Molly's professionalism, her poise, her decade of contributions. On the surface, it sounded supportive, but beneath it, it reeked of fear. Fear that Molly might turn her goodbye into a tell-all. Fear that she might reveal just how toxic the culture really was. Fear that the world might finally see ESPN's golden boy, Stephen A. Smith, for who he truly is behind the cameras. Because make no mistake, Stephen A. isn't just a commentator. He's a corporation. He's the face of ESPN's brand. He's the man they've built their empire around. If he falls, the ripple effect could shake the entire network. And Molly, she knows that. So where does this leave us? It leaves us staring at a standoff. On one side, Stephen A. and ESPN, desperate to keep the truth buried. On the other, Molly, holding the silence, and maybe, just maybe, holding the receipts. And the public is growing restless. Already, YouTube channels, podcasts, and even mainstream outlets are speculating about what really happened. Some point to the power imbalance, others to the money gap. Still others whisper about personal friction between Molly and Stephen A. that went far beyond the cameras. Whatever the case, the result is the same. ESPN looks vulnerable. Stephen A. looks defensive. And Molly looks like the only one who walked away with her dignity intact. And the irony? By trying to silence her, ESPN may have made her louder than ever. Because the moment she launches her own platform, whether Whether it's a podcast, a show, or even just a single interview, the world will tune in. Not for sports talk, not for debate, but for the truth. The truth about why she left. The truth about how ESPN operates. The truth about Stephen A. Smith. And that truth could be explosive. Think about the ripple effects, sponsors, partnerships, future hires. If Molly decides to expose ESPN, it could send shockwaves through the entire industry, and fans are already hungry for it. Social media is buzzing with one question: when will Molly finally speak? Until then, we're left with the leaks, the footage, the awkward silences, the viral clips of Molly storming off set, Stephen A. fumbling his goodbyes, executives scrambling to explain the inexplicable. And those leaks are damning enough, because even without Molly's receipts, the story is clear. A woman gave 20 years to a company, 10 years to a single show. She carried herself with grace, kept chaos in check, and became a fixture in millions of homes. And when she finally asked for what she deserved, respect, opportunity, fair pay, she was dismissed. And that dismissal is going viral. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. If this is what happened to Molly Querim, what does it say about the rest of the industry? How many other voices have been silenced, underpaid, and pushed out to protect the powerful? And maybe that's the true legacy of this scandal. Not just the end of Molly and Stephen A.'s partnership, not just the collapse of First Take as we knew it, but the exposure of a system that thrives on silence. For now, Molly is quiet, but silence doesn't last forever. And when she finally decides to speak, when those receipts hit the public, don't be surprised if Stephen A.'s empire crumbles in real time, because the truth always comes out. And when it does, ESPN won't just have lost a moderator, they'll have lost the very trust of the fans they depend on. And that is the part of this story that ESPN fears the most. That wraps up this video. For more interesting videos like this, check out the cards on your screen.